Welcome into another episode of the Sports Authority Gurus podcast. I am your host, Keegan Russell, and my running mate, as always, Spencer Gray is with me. Spencer, how's it going?
It's going good. A lot better than I'm not a Knicks fan.
Yeah, we're going to get into that. Knicks fans are not happy right now. So today, guys, we wanted to give you a quick recap on the 2022 NBA draft now that it has concluded. So we're going to break down some of those picks, share some of our insights on what we think some of the teams are doing, especially the Knicks, because I don't think anyone has an answer for that. We'll make some rookie predictions, kind of talk about rookie of the year candidates, who's going to have a standout season, just things we want to see out of the rookie class. And then we'll kind of jump ahead and take a look at some potential trades and free agency moves since the moratorium period is coming up here on June 30th. And that is the official start of the offseason, where players and teams can start to talk about deals and announce them, but they're not official until the new league year begins. So that's kind of a rundown of what we're going to do today. So let's start with the draft. If you guys listened to us in our pre-draft episode, one, thank you. But two, just to toot our own horn for a second, we decided that Paolo Banchero was the number one prospect on the board, which was not common amongst the rest of the people talking draft. It was Jabari Smith going number one, maybe Chet, maybe Chet, but it was still probably Jabari Smith. And we got it right, guys. We predicted Paolo would be the number one pick, and we gave a great breakdown as to why. And it turns out the Magic ownership and front office was listening to us that day, and they decided to change course surprisingly and pick Paolo, which if you guys pay attention to Woj that day, he said the draft could be really shaken up that night if the Magic go away from Jabari Smith like everyone anticipated. It didn't get too crazy outside of that, but they did pick Paolo first instead of Jabari, which was, not the expectation. So just based on how the draft started, the first several picks, and if you guys saw our tweet about our big board, it was pretty much the same as what we projected outside of a few swaps here and there. So I'm just going to run down the draft picks. So we started off with Paolo at number one, going to the Orlando Magic. And then the Thunder took, like we all expected, Chet Holmgren at number two. That had kind of been a foregone conclusion. The way that the Thunder were talking about him and Chet talking about the Thunder, it seemed like that was the pick. So the Rockets, with the number three pick, had Jabari Smith fall right into their lap. I'm sure they would have been fine with any of those picks, but they do get the guy that was projected to be number one, so they're pretty happy there. The Kings at number four drafted Keegan Murray out of Iowa. The Pistons then, who probably had one of the best drafts of this year, which we'll talk about. The Pistons got Jaden Ivey at number five. The Pacers then took Benedict Mathurin at 6. The Blazers took Shaedon Sharpe at 7. Pelicans took Dyson Daniels out of the G League at 8. The Spurs took Jeremy Sohan out of Baylor at 9. The Wizards then took Johnny Davis from Wisconsin. Then the Knicks, who had the pick, drafted Ousmane Dieng. And if you were watching the draft, of course, everyone started booing and they were pissed off. Rightfully so. That pick ended up moving to Oklahoma City later in a slurry of trades. So the Thunder ended up with the 11th and the 12th pick, getting Ousmane Dieng, and then Jalen Williams out of Santa Clara, which is different from the Jalen Williams they drafted later. Two Jalen Williams, very confusing. We'll talk about that later. Then the Hornets took Jalen Duren at 13, who that ended up getting moved via other trades with the Knicks and whatnot. He ended up with Detroit. And then, like we all projected, Ochai Agbaji went 14th to the Cavaliers. And then Mark Williams at 15 to the Hornets. So that's kind of your top 15 there. Outside of that, a couple bigger names that slipped. AJ Griffin went 16 to the Hawks. Tari Eason, 17 to the Rockets. And then we'll get in from there. So let's jump back at the top. Spencer, top three, Paolo 1, Chet 2, Jabari 3. What did you think of the Magic listening to us and actually going the route of Paolo?
I liked the pick, obviously, because I thought he was the most pro-ready prospect. And I think teams like the Magic need to stop drafting on potential and then they need to start taking pro-ready players. And I think that's what they did. And Paolo's a really good prospect. I mean, people will say that it doesn't have a high ceiling as Chet and Jabari, and that might be true in a sense. it doesn't mean that, he's going to be any less of the caliber player that they're going to be. So they got a really good versatile guy, can, defend multiple positions, has a jumper, has handles, can take the ball up the floor. And Chet and Jabari also just kind of mirror a little bit of Mo Bamba. And I mean, obviously they could be better players than Mo Bamba, but I just think they've gone that route before. So I really like the move. I was really surprised at Jabari and Chet being flipped. I thought Jabari was going to go to the Thunder. And I thought, because I had predicted Chet would fall a little bit just because of health concerns. So I thought at most he'd go to 3. So I was more surprised in that than I was at Banchero going number 1. But I think the Magic did a decent job. Now it's just going to be about maybe flipping some young players for a veteran or doing something so they're not going to be a lottery team, or at least a bottom lottery team.
Yeah, they still have a logjam in the post position. I mean, they've got Jonathan Isaac, 6'11", 220, combo forward wing. You got Franz Wagner in the draft last year, who they're very, very high on. He's kind of that 3-4 guy. They traded for Wendell Carter last year, and he's kind of been their man in the middle. And then, of course, Mo Bamba. Bamba might go somewhere else in free agency, but assuming he's back, I actually thought Paulo was still the best fit for them because Jabari I think Jabari has a high upside, but if they really like Jonathan Isaac, then why do you want to bring somebody in that's already going to take minutes from? It just seemed like Paulo was the better of the 3 to fit their immediate needs. And again, I'm one that believes fans want to see immediate impact as quickly as possible. So Paulo being that guy, he's an incredible playmaker. He's an extension of the point guard out there. He can score from all over on the court. I think they will figure out how to develop his 3-point shot. So I think, again, fantastic pick there. I'm glad he went number 1 over Jabari because I think Jabari actually ended up in a better situation with the Rockets that we'll get into. So Thunder take Chet second overall. Again, that was probably the most likely scenario, regardless of Banchero going number 1 instead of Jabari. Great fit. Now they've got 2 7-footers that weigh less than 200 pounds, but they seem to be really excited with his upside. He can shoot.
Slim Towers.
The Slim Towers. Incredible shot blocker, though, and I'm sure they'll work on his frame. And he joins a team that has a lot of young talent in the Thunder, who we'll get into when we talk about some offseason stuff. They have a lot of potential to make some big moves in the offseason if they want to add some pieces, move some stuff around, cap space, all that kind of stuff. But the Rockets get Jabari at 3, dream come true for them. I think that's almost a perfect pairing with Jalen Green. You got 2 guys who can score lights out from anywhere. So now they kind of have I think it's going to be somewhat similar to a Jason Tatum, Jaylen Brown scenario, different play style, but that kind of combo where you've got two guys that could really score the ball. Obviously, they both have to develop defensively and show all that, but that might have actually been the best move for Jabari falling to number 3 because now, 1, he doesn't have the stress of the expectations of number 1 pick. Now he can just go in and say, hey, Thunder, Magic, you guys were wrong. I'm here to prove you wrong. So great fit for him. Anything with that roster that stands out to you as far as where they can go moving forward? Again, they're a super young team, really the one veteran on their team. I guess, John Wall opted into his contract. We'll see if he actually ends up playing. They also have Eric Gordon, who surprisingly didn't get moved. So what do you think of that core now with Jabari being added in?
I'm not as high on the Rockets as I am some of the other young teams, just because I'm not really sure what their play style is going to be. I mean, they do have some decent pieces around, and I think Jalen Green, he definitely struggled, but I think he still has really high upside. And I do like the 1-2 punch of him, Jabari. But outside of that, they just have a lot of question marks because we don't know what's going to happen with Wall. I'm really surprised they didn't move Gordon. I mean, they seem to be. It was kind of like when Al Horford went to the Thunder. It was kind of like, are you trying to be a young team that's rebuilding? Yeah. Why are you signing, an older veteran? I don't know. So unless he's a locker room presence kind of guy, I'm not sure. But I also don't know what Kevin Porter Jr. is going to do. They're kind of a question mark to me. I'm not as big on their core as I am on some others. And the good part is, they still have room to develop. They have a lot of high ceiling guys. So including Jabari. So, he's got a very high ceiling. So we'll see how he can develop, if he can develop his handles and become a better playmaker and develop defensively. He's kind of where they were at with Christian Wood a little bit. I think he's a better scorer overall,
Yeah.
but you get similar height, similar build. They can both step outside and shoot. So I don't know. I think they kind of traded a little bit with, NBA ready with, a Christian Wood, established pro, and then they got a guy that's similar but probably has a little bit of a higher ceiling. So it's kind of a question mark with the Rockets for me.
I was convinced throughout the day when I was looking at potential trades and moves, I was convinced Eric Gordon was getting moved to the Celtics or the Sixers. And I thought the Sixers had a tremendous chance of trading their pick to Houston to get Gordon because they were really high on him. And eventually, they ended up moving that pick for D'Anthony Melton, which we can talk about in a minute. But yeah, Rockets, I think moving on from Christian Wood, they wanted to, I think, change their play style a little bit. Now that they were able to see Jalen Green with Kevin Porter, I think they want to play a little bit more up tempo, move the ball, and Christian Wood probably didn't fit that as well with the other pieces they have. So great fit there. Let's jump into the Kings. This is where we talked about that the draft truly was going to start was at number 4. For a week or so, it was the talk was Jaden Ivey does not want to go to the Kings at 4, but Jaden Ivey would be the next guy off the board as far as top prospects. So were they going to trade it? Were they going to just take Jaden Ivey anyway and just, continue their method of drafting high quality guards and ruining their career? Ultimately, if there were trade offers, it wasn't enough to get them to move. So I wouldn't say surprise move, but they ended up taking Keegan Murray out of Iowa. Spencer, you said on the last episode that you're pretty high on him. I myself am not quite as high as you. I have some question marks, but what did you think of that pick? And do you think he fits in with what the Kings are trying to do?
I think he does, but he does not push them past the wall that they're at. I think it's going to be the only question mark I have about the pick is how is he going to work with Sabonis because they're similar, builds and play styles. I think he can play as a 3 just fine and be okay. So that's my only question mark is the fit with Sabonis, but it's really the best they could do. It really is tough for them because I think any of the first 3 people taken would have helped them tremendously. And they fell to a place that literally their biggest needs and wants were pretty much gone by that point. So, I mean, you could have reached back and taken, Benedict Mathurin, but I mean, is he going to play with Harrison Barnes? How is that going to work? Could have gotten Shaedon Sharpe. They could have reached back, but I think Keegan Murray was a very safe pick given their position, but I don't think he pushes them past a fringe playoff team because I think they're good enough to make the playoff or make the play-in tournament with Fox, with Sabonis, with Barnes. They got a solid squad, but I don't know if Keegan Murray pushes them over or not.
Yeah, I agree with you there. He doesn't push the needle for me. I think a lot of analysts have said that it was a pretty safe pick. I worry about his fit too because Sabonis kind of plays that point forward role and Murray just to me, I don't know where he's going to play. Is he a 3? Is he a 4? Tweener. You have Harrison Barnes, who's a similar build and play style. So are they bringing Murray in so they can move Barnes out? I think when you have a top 4, top 5 pick like that, you got to get somebody that fits your team better. And I would have gone Benedict Mathurin route or Jaden Ivey. Even though they've got the guards, I think Mathurin could have been had they been picking 5, 6, or 7. Yeah, like you were saying, they were a few picks back. Mathurin to me probably would have made the most sense. They could have traded back even further and gotten one of the other bigs in the draft and moved on from Rashawn Holmes. But the Kings had the potential to really shake up the draft, and it really didn't. But what it did do is it helped the Pistons land their most coveted player in the draft. Like a guy in Jaden Ivey, who his family is very rooted in Detroit. His mom played up there in the women's NBA league, and he is very, very familiar with Detroit. So they get a tremendous guard with high upside to pair with Cade Cunningham in their backcourt. I thought that was probably the best pick of the draft, mostly because you got the most value at pick 5 than what you could have gotten anywhere else. And he fits in great with Cunningham. Now you can slide Cunningham off the ball if you need to, have him play more of that wing position, let Ivy take over at point, but they just have the ability to switch and do a lot of things. So I think they have a great young core now with Ivy. Cunningham. They're bringing back Diallo, who's still really young and needs to show improvement, but Sadiq Bey, who's very capable of going off. Now that Jeremy Grant's not in the mix, he's going to just take over that role. I mean, they also got Jalen Duren later in the draft, but so their 5 spots still have a little bit of questions because they're super young. Kelly Olynyk is kind of their veteran there. But I thought they had a tremendous draft, and letting Jaden Ivey fall to them probably was a mistake that teams are going to wish they didn't pass on. But that was probably one of my favorite picks. And then going through the rest of the top 10, really the only one that kind of surprised me, the Pacers taking Mathurin, that's pretty straightforward. I think that was the best pick there. The one that surprised me the most was probably the Blazers taking Shaedon Sharpe. Everybody assumed that pick was getting traded for some superstar of some kind. So I was a little surprised they went the Sharpe route. A lot of people like Dyson Daniels going there, Jeremy Sohan, Johnny Davis, even Ochai Agbaji there, AJ Griffin. What do you think about the Trailblazers taking Shaedon Sharpe? Was that the best player? Just you take the best guy on the board at that time, or is there something going on behind the scenes that maybe Sharpe plays a factor into?
Yeah, the what I most thought they were going to do is I thought they would take Ben Mathurin if he was still there, or I thought they were going to do Dyson Daniels. And my sleeper pick for them was going to be Johnny Davis to try to get that CJ McCollum style back. But now they have Anthony Simons, so I don't really know what their plan is. I mean, their needs are kind of all over the place in terms of who's going to really help them win. So I think it was a relatively safe pick, and I think they were just going off the best available just because, like I said, their needs are just a little bit all over the place now. So, yeah, I don't know. I think they did the best that they could. I feel bad for a lot of teams. I feel like a lot of them were one spot away from getting the person they really, really needed. And I think the Blazers wanted him. I think Mathurin would have been great for them to get, but we'll see. I think Shaedon Sharpe's going to be a pretty good pro. He's got a good body for it, good high ceiling. So we'll just have to see how that backcourt shapes out because you have Dame, Simons, and Sharpe. And if they want to do slightly undersized, because he's 6'5", so he's a little short for a three guard. So if they want to play 2-2s and just have Dame at the 1, I don't know. I'm not sure, or they just bring him off the bench now. That
I think Sharpe's 6. I thought he was 6'7". I could be wrong on that.
I know
his like wingspan is very large for his height. So
yeah,
he's got a lot of length there.
And that is true. And now that Simons is slipped into a starting role, maybe he'll be a spark off the bench. Obviously, not everyone has to start, but I don't know. I think they did the best with what they had available.
Yeah, it took me a couple of days to realize this. I don't know how much you followed Mike Schmitz before when he was at ESPN, but he's their new assistant general manager.
Wow.
And before he took that role and he was breaking down a lot of the prospects for this draft, he was incredibly high on Shaedon Sharpe. He had him as one of his top 3 guys coming into this draft. And had he actually played at Kentucky, he may have ended up number 1. And if he'd gone back, he'd probably be number 1 pick next year. So I think that's probably some of it. Schmitz was very, very high on Sharpe. But I mean, honestly, he could be a very valuable piece in a future offseason trade for a star player. We saw Dame post on his Instagram, Kevin Durant in a Trailblazers uniform. How much of that is just smoke, or how much of that is saying, "Hey, Blazers, you're stupid. How did you pass up on this guy for Greg Oden?" I would be super thrilled to see Kevin Durant in a Portland uniform. I think that'd be a tremendous pairing. So maybe Sharpe, was the highest value pick you could get right there to package with later. I think that'd be crazy. Yeah. You'd have to package Sharpe with Simons and probably Nasir Little or Justice Winslow for cash flow and Eric Bledsoe and get Durant.
Blazers are looking good, even if they don't land Durant, they're actually looking pretty solid from a roster standpoint now, especially with adding Jeremy Grant. So
they just re-signed Josh. They picked up Josh Hart's option too, so he's back, and they'll probably re-sign Nurkic.
I actually think if Dame can be healthy and not get off to another shooting slump to start the season, I think they could easily slide in the 5 or 4 area if they can play pretty well. It also depends what Simons does. If he takes a step back, that's one thing. But if he takes a step forward and goes up to 23, 24 points a game, we could see a pretty good run from the Blazers.
So just a couple teams I want to mention real quick before we get into some of our favorites and not favorites from this draft. The Pelicans at 8 took Dyson Daniels out of the G League, so they get a point guard to pair with McCollum. Unfortunately, that probably means for us KU fans that Devontae Graham is on the outs, which honestly is okay because I don't think his fit was great with them. But they bring Daniels in. He's probably going to assume the primary point guard spot. He'll obviously have competition, but they get their guy there. And then the Spurs kind of went a little bit off of what was anticipated. People thought they'd go big man. Instead, they took the stretch forward Jeremy Sohan out of Baylor. Really fits their culture, defensive, very strong, very hardworking, athletic, versatile. I think that's a great fit there. And then the Wizards go out and get Johnny Davis. Could be a running mate for Bradley Beal, could be a backup in case Beal leaves. As of right now, Beal has still been kind of uncertain on what he's going to do. The only thing we kind of know for sure is that he's going to opt into his contract. But that doesn't mean that he's sticking around. He could still opt in and ask for a trade. So just looking throughout the first round, let's give me a couple teams that you really, really liked their draft and were impressed with what they came out with.
Well, I love the Pistons draft, obviously, and Ivy was a great pickup to pair with Cunningham. But the other reason I liked it is because I think Jalen Duren's a baller. I think he stood out on a really talented Memphis team. Although they underperformed, they still had guys like Amoni Bates on it, and he still stood out. So I think they got a really good snag for him. And I don't think I don't see them being a playoff contender this season. I could see them maybe being a 9th or 10th seed, but I think in the next like 2 or 3 years, you'll definitely see them as at least 4 or 5 seed because they have a really solid core, and they're young guys that are also really pro ready. Like I think Jaden Ivey's a pretty pro ready guard. He might be a high turnover, slightly bad shooting splits for his first season, but I think he's got a pro body, pro jump shot. And then Cade looked like a veteran for most of the season last year outside of his rough start. So I really like their draft. Obviously I'm going to be a little bit biased, but I think the Cavs hit it very well with Ochai. I think he filled a lot of needs. I like the Nuggets taking Christian. Obviously, again, I'm going to try to be as unbiased as possible, but they did a pretty good job with 21 and 30 because Peyton Watson was a good pick at 30 as well. And then just kind of looking around, I think the top 3 teams did the best that they could. And then, outside of that, I think it was a pretty low key draft for everybody else. Mavs, I like Mavs getting Wendell Moore at 26. I think that was a pretty good pickup.
He's actually that. If you weren't following all the trades, he's going to end up in Minnesota. That was part of the Christian Wood trade.
I lose all these trades.
So the Mavs instead, they got later in the second round, they got Jaden Hardy out of the G League as a part of all that process.
Well, you know what? If that's the case, and I'm trying to think because I know T-Wolves took Jake LaRavia.
That ended up going to Memphis.
Memphis, right? And I liked their draft too, especially nabbing Ty at 29. I really like that as well.
Yeah, and they got Walker Kessler, another big man to add in. Oh, Ty ended up. See, this is guys. There was a lot of trades that happened draft night.
Ty got moved too.
Forgive it. Yeah, Ty ended up going to Houston.
Oh my gosh.
A lot of moving pieces. So Wendell Moore got drafted by Dallas, was headed to Houston, then went from Houston to Minnesota as part of a trade that they did. So which ended up getting Ty drafted by the Grizzlies, sent down to Houston. So a lot of moving pieces. But yeah, I pretty much agree with what you said. I think to me the 2 teams. I mean, it's obvious that the guys at the top, the Pistons by far had the best draft. They got 2 guys without having to give up much, and they didn't have to use Jeremy Grant in either of those trades, and they didn't have to give up anything crazy for him. So that they're the clear winner. I think the 2 teams that hit the best in the lottery were the Hornets and the Cavs. Hornets, they got Mark Williams, which is who they wanted all along, and he fits them perfectly. Gives them some opportunities to kind of shuffle around some of their positions. They've got a lot of questions as far as do they keep Gordon Hayward? Do they keep Kelly Oubre? Are they going to sign Miles Bridges as of right now? the rumor is they're not willing to sign him to a max. So if they do keep him, what is he willing to take? So they have some questions there, but they got their big man in the middle who's going to be a tremendous running mate with LaMelo Ball. He's going to be catching lobs, blocking shots all day. And then, like you said, of course, I think Cavs, obviously super biased there. They had the best pick in the draft for their team as far as need. I was listening to several different guys on CBS, and they were like, "How did the league let Ochai fall to the Cavs?" They feel he's going to be a tremendous fit. And as we'll get into Rookie of the Year stuff later, he's actually got some pretty solid odds on winning Rookie of the Year, even being the 14th pick. And I was disappointed with how he was talked about the draft. Jay Billis kind of overlooked him. He's like, yeah, he's a national champion. He's a winner. And that's what you get. But he's 22, so he might be on the wrong side of potential. I'm like,
yeah, he's an old
all the kid's done is improved every year since he's been playing. So I think that was one of the better picks there. Looking through the lower part of the draft, I thought the Hawks kind of got lucky with AJ Griffin fall into him. He was one I had in the top 10, and he slipped all the way down to 16. Great fit for them. They have a lot of stuff that they're doing in the offseason that we'll kind of talk about in the trades coming up. But I thought he was a great pick for them. Kind of slides in as another wing shooter that can mix in and spread the floor. A guy I wasn't really high on until I started reading more about in the last week, but the Bulls, they really wanted Tari Eason or AJ Griffin, and both were gone, but they got Dalen Terry out of Arizona.
He's a baller.
And he's not a super high ceiling, but they don't really need him to be that. He's going to be a guy that's going to come in and be excellent on defense, great passer, spread the floor, and work alongside to take some of that pressure off Lonzo and even fill in if Lonzo's still hurt. So I thought that was a good pick for them. A guy they probably are going to see play a lot over the next couple of years.
Oh, and also Patrick Baldwin at 28, I think was kind of a steal. I don't know how he fell all the way. I was very high on him.
Yeah, he had a lot of questions just based on where he went and played this last year up in Milwaukee. So he just didn't have as good of a year as they hoped, but he's still got a high potential.
He does. He's got a high ceiling.
How about, looking back at the first round, and of course we're going to talk about in a minute, outside of the Knicks, is there anybody else that you thought had a bad draft, or anybody that overreached, or you're just scratching your head thinking, what were you doing when you made that pick?
Honestly, I think it was a pretty decent draft for most of the teams. Again, I don't think the Kings, and again, this isn't really their fault. I just think their position was not great. I don't think they did much to improve their situation. So, I mean, they'll have a full season to play with their new players, so we'll have to see what that's going to be like. But Portland, yeah, Shaedon Sharpe was a bit of a question mark, but again, I don't think they could have done much better with that. The Spurs, I didn't really get Jeremy Sochan at 9 a whole lot. I don't know what they're trying to do with their roster, but I was with the majority. I thought they were going to get a big man, and I think they could have, maybe reached a little bit back and got Mark Williams or something, or Jalen Duren for that matter. So their pick was a little confusing to me, but outside of that, really, I liked a lot of the moves that we saw yesterday. So we'll just have to see, and again, sometimes with these G League guys, you don't know. So we don't know how Dyson Daniels is going to be. So I don't know. Overall, normally with drafts, I feel like there's at least 3 or 4 losers of the first, of the draft. But outside of the obvious one, I think everyone did a pretty solid job, I'd say.
Yeah, I think I agree with you there. As I'm going through these, there's really not one team that stands out to me that's like, oh man, why did you go that route? Or you really reached on them. So I guess before we get into the Knicks, the Thunder are one that I have some questions on. They have a lot of picks. They trade a bunch of picks. But I think what's confusing to me is they traded several future firsts just to also get the 11th pick in Ousmane Dieng, who has potential, but has a lot of holes in his game. He's not the best shooter. He's not the most strong guy. He's got to put on size and muscle mass. And so I didn't quite understand trading multiple picks away just for that spot. And then I'm not that high on Jalen Williams, the first Jalen Williams they drafted. So I just have a little bit of question marks there. I thought they had some better value they could have gotten by trading back or using that to go get guys that are ready to play now. Because
they need to start. The Thunder needs to start doing something with all these picks and young talent because just adding a new lottery pick to your team every single year, you're going to end up in the lottery again the next year. So, I know they have a plan probably, but they really need to start. Them and Orlando are just constantly like sucking every single year. And, if you see a trajectory, then that's something. And, at least the Kings have had, all-star caliber players and now they got Sabonis and they had Fox. But the Magic and the Thunder, I don't see any upward trajectory outside of like betting on the potential of these lottery picks in 5 to 8 years, which to me is not a very good rebuild plan.
Yeah, I agree with you there. Both of them have spent a lot of time in the high lottery getting talented players, but not really doing anything to really push the needle. The Magic have been competitive, and I think they have a great backcourt. And adding some of the pieces they've got now could be interesting. But let's before we get into the Knicks and look at what they did, let's just talk real quick about Ochai and Christian Brown. Ochai, like we said, this is probably the best fit for him overall. He gets to slide in to a team that just needs a wing defender and scorer that can knock down threes and get buckets. I think it's a great fit for him. He could compete for starting minutes right away. He's probably going to come off the bench. They have a lot of questions on what they're going to do in their offseason if they bring back Colin Sexton or if they move on from him. And if they move on from Sexton, there's a scenario where Ochai could be their starting two guard or Karis LeVert. So excited about that pick there. I think you and I were talking about it. Christian Brown was the surprise one. The Nuggets were a team that really wanted him, but we thought that was coming at the end of the first round, not at 21. So that was kind of a surprise to see him jump up there. But they seemed to be thrilled with that pick. I think they were looking for a guy that could run up and down the court, be aggressive in your face, play solid defense, and again, be another shooter for them to spread around with Jokic. So what do you think of both of their fits with the teams that took them?
Well, I was right and wrong with Christian because I picked him to go to the Nuggets at 30, or one of the, at least that was where I was leaning most. There was a couple of teams he could have went to, but they definitely, in most people's minds, reached up on him since he was projected to be a late first, early second. But I think he was a great pick for them. I think he fits in really well for them. They get a really good, solid two-way player. I think he'll be able to defend right away. And they add some outside shooting. They add some athleticism. They add, probably a guy's probably going to come off the bench, but especially with getting hopefully Porter and Murray back, I think the Nuggets are looking pretty solid, especially with Christian.
Yeah, he's going to be one that he's going to compete hard for playing time for sure. So let's kind of wrap up draft talk by looking at some predictions for the rookies. And we are going to kind of start with Rookie of the Year candidates. I'm going to pull up here a list of the odds, and we'll look at that, and then we'll finish that part off with first team rookies. Okay, so let's look at the NBA Rookie of the Year odds for the upcoming season. Right now, Paulo is the clear favorite. No, I wouldn't say clear favorite. He's just a little bit ahead of Jabari. But here's, the top 10 in order. So Paulo's 1, Jabari Smith 2, Jaden Ivey 3, Keegan Murray 4, Ben Mathurin 5, Shaden Sharp 6, Dyson Daniels 7, Johnny Davis 8, Ochai Agbaji 9, and Jalen Williams 10. Surprisingly, no one has Chet in the top 10, which I thought was quite odd. This one's from Caesars. So I'm going to pull up another one here too, just to compare with, because I don't know how accurate that is. So as I'm pulling that up, Spencer, who are your favorites to win Rookie of the Year?
Well, just thinking about it, I'm guessing people are predicting an injury-heavy season for Chet and missing some time, maybe. I don't know.
Mm-hmm. That would make sense.
I think to completely put him out of the top 10 is a little dumb. I think he's going to be a really, really good player if he can stay healthy. But
see, here's another one. This one's all over the place. This one has Chet at 3, Jalen Duren in the top 10, and then second round pick EJ Liddell as a top 10 odds maker. So that's all over the place.
I would say I don't know if Abaji is going to be. I obviously want to say that Abaji has some potential to be top 10, top 5, but I don't know if he's going to have as much offensive touches to do that. If I had to guess, to me, it comes down between Banchero and Jaden Ivey. I think it's going to be one of those two. I think Ivy is just can be really, really dynamic right off the bat. And I think Banchero is just overall the best pro prospect. And he is on the Magic, however, and I think the Magic kind of suffer for. So it's going to be good for him. He's going to put up really good numbers being on such a bad team. But if they finish with 10 wins, nobody's going to give him Rookie of the Year, even if he is arguably the best player. So that's why I think Ivy, since they can get up to the 9, 10, or maybe even sneak into the 8th spot, I think he's got a better shot at that. I think Jabari is definitely top 5 in that, but I would definitely put those two. A sleeper pick, the highest I would go, Ben Mathurin, I think, especially with LeVert being off the Pacers. I think he's going to have a chance to be a bulk of their offense right off the bat.
Yeah, I think for me it'd be Jaden Ivey would be my pick, just again because of fit and the way they're going to play. Um, I do think Jabari would be my number 2 over Paulo, just because I think their system he's going to be relied upon to score a lot more. Whereas in the Magic, I don't think Paulo leads them in scoring this year. They have such a dynamic backcourt with Cole Anthony and Jalen Suggs and even RJ Hampton and Markelle Fultz. There's so much offensive production at their guard spot that they don't need Paulo to do that. But that could mean Paulo averages a double-double or, averages 3 or 4 assists a game. If he shoots, 40% plus from 3 and is doing pretty well in all the other statistical categories, he could be fine. But I think Jaden Ivey and Jabari are the runaways with it. I don't know if I have a true sleeper. I think the rest of the guys in that list just have to have tremendous scoring opportunities to even get close. Maybe someone like Johnny Davis, if Bradley Beal were to move on, or if Beal got hurt and was out for a long time. But I think it's pretty much Ivy at the top. How about give me your set? We'll do 7 guys. So even though all rookie first team would be 5, give me your 7 guys that you think are competing for all rookie first team.
7 guys. Well, obviously, I think it's going to be Paulo and Jabari, probably locks. The thing with Shed is that they're all the same position, so one of them's not going to be all first team. So I still say if Shed is healthy, he makes all second team, and I think on a given year he probably would make first team. But since there's such an influx in centers, but for first team, Paulo and Jabari are locks. I think Jaden Ivey's a lock. I would probably say, let's see, that's 3. I think Ben Mathurin makes a push for 2. Like I said, I think he's just going to have a really good opportunity to make that leap just with the offensive opportunities he's going to have. And then I could see some later guys sneak in. I could see for sure someone like I don't know, like you said, Johnny Davis maybe, but I'm trying to think here. This one's tricky because there's only a handful of
it doesn't have to be a traditional, starting 5. I know a lot of times now the way they do these awards that they just go with the 5 best guys that could play those positions. So it doesn't have to be your like traditional players in those positions.
Yeah, so I got those 4 guys. I think Keegan Murray could slip in. He could have good production. And then I'd probably say, I think if Jeremy Socon comes in and he's an instant factor on defense too, like maybe makes first team all defense, I might slip him in the first team. And then, you know what? I'll throw a plug in there. If Ochai comes in, good 2-way player, shoots over 40% from 3, is on a contender or at least a playoff contender, then I think he could sneak in there as well.
Yeah, mine's not too different. I have a couple more sleeper picks though. I've got Ivy, Paulo, Ben, and Jabari as the for sure locks. Again, I'm with you with Chet. I think he's probably more second team. He could easily be first team, but I don't know what his game's gonna look like necessarily with the Thunder. I think he'll do fine getting stats, but I could see a guy like Ben just based on where he's at, he could be having a more productive season. So that gives him a spot there. And of course, Jabari, Paul, and Ivy are all there. I've got Ochai as a sleeper for this too, again, just because of the team he's on and the role he can play. He could easily, some people have him compared to Buddy Hield. He's not as consistent of a shooter as Buddy Hield, but he could easily have a year where he's averaging 12 to 13, just because he's getting a lot of open looks. And if he's shooting high percentages, he could sneak on there. I do like the Sohan pick. That could be a sneaky one. He's going to be so good defensively that's probably going to give him an edge over a lot of guys because he's just already an NBA ready defender. But then my two sleeper guys, I've got Mark Williams on there. Be more because he's your more traditional big man, versus a guy like Chet, and Paulo. I think he's gonna be averaging close to a double double. I'm convinced, and 1.5 to 2.5 blocks a game.
I agree.
Stuff in the stat sheet with dunk, so I think he's on there. And then my sleeper pick at guard, I have Dyson Daniels on there. Again, I think not because he's going to be super productive offensively, but if he steps into the role as the primary ball handler and is a great facilitator for that offense and is able to, average 7-8 assists to McCollum and Brandon Ingram and Zion, I think he could be a sleeper for on there too, because he's a pretty solid defender.
Absolutely.
So that's the draft. Any surprise guys that in the second round you thought would get picked, or any guys left on the board? I mean, I don't have that list pulled up in front of me. There's plenty of guys that went undrafted. For KU fans, David McCormick is playing summer league ball with the Timberwolves. Right now, no news on Remy. I don't really have any true guys on my list that I was surprised didn't get drafted. I saw a lot of people were surprised Remy didn't get drafted. He wasn't on my draft board anywhere. Is there anybody, that you're thinking of that even a guy that went late in the second round that should have gone higher?
Not really. I have seen a lot on EJ Liddell, and I know he was first team. I can't remember if it was injuries or something else that kind of slowed him down a little bit.
He just doesn't have the potential. Like, to me, he's a PJ Tucker mold kind of guy who's going to come in. He's not going to score 15 plus a night. He might score 3 to 5, but he can kind of play that Draymond Green, PJ Tucker type guy who, you're gonna stick him on the floor defensively, get rebounds, be aggressive. And so I was surprised he fell so far, but he's my pick too. That I thought he should have gone higher, and my teams might be upset they passed on him.
I agree. A couple quick picks that I liked in the second round, like Caleb Houston at 32. I did like the other Jalen Williams from Arkansas. I think he's got a high motor and a really good frame. He's already, I think, like 6'10", 240 or something like that. I liked Kennedy Chandler out of Tennessee at 38. I think he's a pretty solid prospect. And all the way down at 49, I liked Isaiah Mobley, putting him with his
I forgot to mention that. Really That's fantastic. I have the Mobley brothers in the paint.
They play really well together. They know each other. Trevor Keels at 42. The Knicks trying to do something. They just grabbed the only Duke player they could think of, so their fans would know who he is. So shout out to them. There's a couple guys in that second round, and shout out to guy Santos at 55, also from Brazil. I like seeing Brazilian players get a shout because the basketball's not that big over there yet. So
how about these two guys didn't get drafted, but the Lakers signed 2-way contracts with Scottie Pippen Jr. and Sharif O'Neal. So how about having, Pippen and O'Neal on the Lakers potentially? That's crazy there.
That's another. The Knicks and the Lakers, they will draft and sign players just because they're known to the general public. I will stand by this. And Pippen, and I'm not saying that as a knock on either of them. I think they're actually pretty good prospects. And I think Sharif would have been a very high on people's boards if he didn't have
the injury problem.
But those were two good signings, but I do maintain that they do that.
So since we've been bringing up the Knicks now, let's jump there. They had a first round pick at 11. I think to preface this, they traded pretty much everything away. They got a ton of future firsts coming back. And I think their main priority this offseason was to clear up cap space. So I don't think they were looking that heavily for someone in the draft. And kind of like you were saying with a lot of the guys in the top 10, they really probably just bad positioning. If they were 8th or 9th, they may have actually took somebody. But based on their draft selection where they were, none of the guys on their board were ranked high enough for them to take. So what do you think the Knicks are trying to do? And should they have, instead of giving up those picks, should they have taken somebody that was there, or is this all about, the offseason free agency and moving some guys around?
No, I don't disagree with the decision not to take anyone. I will say Jalen Duren would have been a very good addition. I don't know what they're going to do with Mitchell Robinson, but
He might price himself out of New York
that
just off of
exactly.
his potential.
I don't mind the Knicks clearing cap space, and I don't think there was a game changer at their position that they were going to get that was automatically going to push them over this mid playoff fringe team. My problem is who they're clearing cap space for, because the Knicks like to do this thing where they like to clear cap space because they're going to get Zion and Kyrie and KD all in one off, and then they're going to
get none of them.
They're going to sign and we've talked about this before. They're going to pay Jalen Brunson way too much money. Jalen Brunson is a great player. He is not worth near what they're going to give him. And again, not a knock against him. It's just the Knicks empty their bank accounts for guys that they shouldn't do that with, guys that are at best a third or fourth option. So I think that's probably who they're going to go out to sign. I don't know. I mean, Beal indicates probably that he's going to re-sign with Washington. Wall just went to the Clippers, so they can't overpay him, thankfully. But yeah, I don't know. That's my thing. If they just had a better plan, because Zion, we had talked about like over this, a couple months ago, maybe reuniting him with RJ, but he just signed with New Orleans. So I don't know what their plan is. I mean, if they think they're going to get KD or Kyrie again, I don't know. It's just kind of a mystery to me. I don't know what they're doing.
Yeah, since Leon Rose has taken over, there's been a lot of question marks. People are like, well, is he going to translate well from being an agent to knowing how to actually build a team? How is he going to do there? And he had a statement after the draft, and he's like, hey, don't worry too much about not drafting now. We've got 11 picks in the next several years that we're excited about. This gives us the ability to clear up cap space and all that. Brunson's definitely number one on their board. I just read the other day that apparently it's either Jalen Brunson's dad or uncle is an assistant coach for the Knicks. So that's clearly going to be a move they go after. Brunson, again, yeah, he's going to get overpaid to be there for sure. That's what the Knicks do. They did that a couple years ago when they brought in Bobby Portis and Marcus Morris.
And
they signed Julius. They signed all these guys to way more than they're worth. Alec Burks, Evan Fournier. So they're really good at it. They did get out of the Kemba Walker deal, moved on from him. But they are definitely clearing up cap space. They could still make some moves. I want to say Julius Randle's gone. I don't really know. Like I've looked through a lot of trade scenarios and I don't really see one with him in it that I really like that makes a lot of sense. But they could look to move him to clear up cap space. Kyrie, today's actually been a lot of news. So we're recording this on the 27th. And Spencer just jumped the gun on some news I was going to break to you guys. Not that, it won't be news for you guys by the time you hear this, but John Wall just got his contract bought out with the Rockets, and now he's going to sign with the Clippers. But Kyrie today, he's been a lot of talk the last week, which we're going to get into him here a little bit more later too. But he's opting into his contract. He was on the Knicks list. That was going to be really difficult to do. So no one really knows what they're doing other than they're probably going after Jalen Brunson with a lot. And they're going to overpay to have him in their backcourt. I honestly don't know if his fit is good for them because he's undersized and I don't know how his play style is going to work with someone like RJ Barrett. There's been talks of them wanting to trade for Dejounte Murray with the Spurs, but they're not quite willing to give up enough yet. But the Knicks, if they're good at anything, they are good at disappointing their fan base. Stephen A has said he has almost basically declared he's not going to a game at all this year at the Garden because of how upset he is. They're clearly gonna do something. I bet they get out of the Fournier contract. There'll be another contending team who will want a good shooter that thinks he'll bounce back with them. So I'm interested to see what they do in free agency and just hope that they don't just go spend it all on Brunson, which is probably what they'll do.
I agree.
So with that, let's jump into some off-season stuff. So let's start right there with what you said with John Wall getting his contract bought out with the Rockets. This was something talked about all of last year, and he was very adamant he was not going to agree to a buyout because he didn't want to give up money, which in his case was smart because he got paid last year to do nothing. Agrees to the buyout now. He had several teams on his list. The Lakers, the Clippers, and the Heat were the top three looking for him. The Mavericks were on that list too, the Knicks, even the Nets. So what do you think this does for the Clippers? What do you think it does for John Wall? He's played like 3 games in the last 5 years, and he's made like $1 billion in that time frame. We've seen workouts of him, so he's clearly in those workouts. Looks like he's in shape and doing well. Do you think that does anything for the Clippers, or is this just more of a hey, we gotta wait and see once he gets on the court?
You definitely have to wait. I mean, when he did play with the Rockets, I think he was putting up 16, 17 points a game. So he obviously can still play. I was a little disappointed. I wanted to see him go to the Mavs. I think he would have been a really good fit there, having like a guy that can come off the bench, high energy, high motor, quick, can control the pacing off the bench. So I was a little disappointed, but I honestly think the fit with the Clippers is not bad because Reggie Jackson's kind of become the guy. He's even with Paul George on the field, he was their closer,
Yeah,
which was crazy. So, giving a guy, take a little bit of the offensive workload off him, and because Wall, if he is in shape, then he is, one of the quickest, fastest players. At least he was. May not be anymore. Might have lost a little bit of his step, but he can certainly be an energy boost off the bench. Give Jackson a time to rest, and I mean, you have hopefully Kawhi and PG going to be healthy this season. So the Clippers, I obviously it's LA, so some of it's going to be like, hey, look, our fans will know this player.
sure.
But I also do think it was a decent signing, especially for pretty much nothing. So good for Wall. I really like John Wall. I really hope he can actually stay healthy and play. He was really fun to watch on the Wizards, during his younger days. So I hope he can actually be on the court. And yeah, I don't know. If Clippers aren't in people's top 3 favorites to win the West right now, if healthy, then I don't know. I think
Yeah, I think if they're healthy, they should be the favorite coming out of the West because
I
Kawhi in
agree.
the playoffs is just a whole
Yeah.
nother world.
Yeah.
So let's talk about Kyrie for a minute. You know, he's a guy who's incredibly frustrating. Everyone knows that. Everywhere he's gone the last couple of years has been a bust. It's been a bummer. He's done a lot off the court and not enough on the court. So the talk lately was that he was going to opt out or look for a sign and trade, and ultimately today he ended up deciding to opt into his last remaining year. That does actually hurt him in the long run. Woj tweeted out some stuff about it. Now because of the opt-in and the timing of it, he's not eligible for the full max that he could have gone if he had done this sooner or done the sign and trade. So he can still be traded in a sign and trade. He just can't get the full potential contract that he would have if they had agreed to something sooner. I thought was funny though, listening to everybody talk about it today, only the Lakers were interested in a sign and trade. So clearly that tells you the league's like, nah, we'll take Kyrie
Yeah.
if it doesn't cost us much, but we're not going out of our way to get this guy.
Yeah.
Lakers make sense because they want an upgrade to Russell Westbrook for fit wise. And, he's played with LeBron. He's talked about how maybe he'd like to play with him again. So just looking at Kyrie, are there any options for the Nets? I was kind of hoping this would break the Nets up and we'd see Kevin Durant move too. And again, that's still possible.
It is.
But do you see any scenarios where Kyrie gets traded and any moves? I've tried to make the Kyrie Russell Westbrook trade work and I cannot figure out how to do it. I've sat here and tried to do 3-team trades too, and there's just not his contract's too much and every team's over on salary that there's just so many moving pieces. I don't know how you do get it done, but is there a team that you think could pull off a Kyrie trade, or is it even in the Nets' best interest to move on from him now?
I don't think it is. I don't think they should move him. Everyone likes to drag on Kyrie a little bit, and he's done some iffy stuff. But I've always been a pretty big Kyrie fan. Just on the court, I think and I'm talking about strictly basketball talent. I think he's a top 10 player to ever touch a basketball in terms of.
Yeah, he's got incredible skill and talent.
Oh my gosh.
One of the best ball handlers we've ever seen.
Oh, absolutely. I don't think it comes close to ball handling and finishing off the glass. I don't think I've ever seen anyone better. So I think, and he's still in his prime. That's the crazy thing. With everything that's happened and how long it feels like he's, 35, but he's still, I mean, the player, he's not a guy that he overuses his athleticism a whole lot. He plays below the rim. And so he is still a very dominant player, and he can, even with KD and Harden on the floor, he was still a guy that was commanding a lot of the attention. So I don't think they should move him. I think it'd be dumb to move him. I don't see, like you said, I mean, a trade with the Lakers just doesn't make a lot of sense, and that's the only team that even wants him. And I just don't know why you would do that if you're the Nets. You have a team that's, it was a disappointing year, but the whole thing with Kyrie playing at the home arena, it sounds like that's done with. Now he can play in home games. He's rested. He, is going to have a long off season. With the team as talented, you have Durant, Kyrie. Now you have Ben Simmons, who, again, everyone likes to drag on, but he's really, really good when he plays outside of that Atlanta series.
Yeah.
I just don't think he'd break that up without even trying. I mean, let them build some offensive chemistry, sign a couple players that will maybe help you defensively, and kind of build your identity a little bit around that. And when the offensive chemistry builds, they'll stop playing so much ISO, which is what got them in trouble. Kevin Durant's an unguardable player, but when he goes down and plays ISO every time, defenses can adjust. That's why, Tatum was able to lock him up so well, because they had a game plan centered around stopping Durant's ISO. The more chemistry they build, the more the ball moves and they figure out how to play with each other. That won't be an issue anymore. And if the Nets are healthy and they actually put it together, they could easily be a contender in the East. So I think it's way too early to break that up.
Yeah, and there's just, like I said, there's realistically not any trade scenarios that make sense unless you just straight up Westbrook for Irving. And even then, if you're the Nets, I'd be like, nah, you want us to take Westbrook, so give us a little bit more.
Yeah.
So we're not going to touch too long on that, but I haven't found a trade that makes sense for Russell Westbrook. Anything there?
I don't know. I don't know what team would want him. I mean, maybe the Knicks would take him just because of the kind of player he is and the caliber of his name. But, I wouldn't, if I'm the Lakers, I don't want Julius Randle because he doesn't fit with Anthony Davis at all. So
you'd have to take at least Fournier and Burks back for contract purposes.
Which I honestly wouldn't mind. I actually, right when you said they could move Fournier, I immediately thought of the Lakers because he's an older veteran. He can be overpaid, and he's a good shooter, supposedly a good shooter. That's their kind of player. And then he gets there and he shoots 28%.
Yeah.
Getting Fournier and Burks and maybe some younger players. I don't know, get some of their younger talent. Obviously, they're not going to part with RJ, but that maybe I could see that work. Maybe the Heat want to put something together because there's been talks of him going back to there for a while. Or if OKC wants to take him back, I don't know, bring back the hometown hero. I don't know. There's really nothing I can think of. So I think the Lakers might just have to figure it out.
Yeah, again, they're just gonna have to make do, and I think Westbrook can work out with them. They just got to find a groove and figure it out. So let's look at some before we talk more trades. Let's look at some of the free agent guys. Not a tremendously great free agent class unless you get some of these guys that opt out. So unless Zach Levine and James Harden opt out, there's really not too much going on in free agency. Bradley Beal, again, could be in there. Really, when I'm looking at it, your top guys on the board, DeAndre Ayton's probably the number one. Miles Bridges is up there. Is probably your top two. Jalen Brunson, Colin Sexton, Anthony Simons, who the Trailblazers are probably going to re-sign, but he's technically a free agent. Those are really your top of the line guys. Outside of that, it's really just a lot of bench players, role players. Tyus Jones could be somebody that gets a decent payday because he had a solid year when John Morant was out. Mitchell Robinson could sign somewhere else. Just does anything about this free agent class get you excited? Do you see anything that all right, this is a guy teams clearly need to go after? We've heard of basically the Pistons were doing a lot to go get DeAndre Ayton. Maybe they don't go that route now since they took Jalen Duren, but
Yeah.
that could still be in play. Anything you want to touch on with some of those top tier guys?
No, I actually think, and I know I say this a lot, and it always ends up being wrong, but I think it actually could be a decently quiet. Um,
Yeah, we were wrong when we did the
too.
trade deadline.
Very, very wrong on that. I think the biggest ones, I do think Aiden has the highest chance of being moved. Somebody that I think to keep an eye on could be Zach Levine. I've seen there's been whispers around the league about him potentially getting moved. I don't really know what the best destination for him is. I'd like to see him stay in Chicago. But that's personally just me. Somebody I think that is kind of a sleeper is Miles Bridges. I think he definitely could get moved somewhere. There's going to be the guys that are fringe max deals that think they should get the maxi, they should get a higher contract, and maybe a team like Charlotte or like Mikal Bridges and Phoenix. It's they have a lot of moving pieces, a lot of guys they have to pay. I could see them maybe getting moved just because of contract disputes, but other than that, yeah, I don't know.
The Pacers are really high on Miles Bridges, so they've been taking a long look at him, and I'm sure they'll offer him a pretty big contract because he would fit what they're doing pretty well. But yeah, overall, I mean, unless you get your superstar guys at the top, Kyrie would have been on that list. The problem that when you look at the NBA landscape is there's just not a lot of money out there. No. There's not a lot of teams that have much cap space to go sign a big guy like that. You've got, the Knicks that have some money. Charlotte has a little bit of money. The Thunder have clearly a lot of money. The Pistons. There's just really not a lot of options for guys that are looking to go score the bag this offseason. So that could lead to a somewhat quiet offseason. It could lead to guys that do take, maybe we see some more short-term contracts versus long-term ones. Jalen Brunson, I'm going to guess probably is the guy, unless Levine or Beal or Harden become free agents. Brunson's probably going to be the guy that gets the biggest contract out of this, maybe DeAndre Ayton, but I don't really see a lot that excites me. I think if anything, a guy like PJ Tucker is probably going to get a stupid amount of money. The Sixers really want to go get him, and I think he'd be a tremendous fit with them, and they're going to have to overpay for him. But he's 37 years old, and there's still talk of him getting a 3-year, $30 million deal. So that really this free agent class is really made up of role players and off the bench guys. Bobby Portis, maybe one of the other guys with some bigger upside, but he really wants to stay in Milwaukee. So I don't know if he goes anywhere. So really not a lot in the free agent side. So let's look at some trade scenarios. Some of the names have been thrown out there, which we kind of talked about in the pre-draft process. Dejounte Murray's name's been tossed around, and I really don't. I mean, the latest today is that the Hawks are really deep into conversations with the Spurs with a trade that's obviously not, in my opinion, best interest for the Spurs because it doesn't have John Collins in it. Yeah. But right now it's been looking at Gallinari going back to the Spurs with multiple draft picks, and then Atlanta getting Dejounte Murray. I don't like that. I don't think that's a great fit. That gives
I agree.
the Hawks 2 ball dominant guards. So his name's been thrown out, and obviously John Collins is probably the most likely one to get moved. Julius Randle, again, Bradley Beal. So just let's look at some of those. Any names that you would like to see get moved, or that a team that you think needs to go after one of those guys?
Collins, I actually like Collins to the Blazers, and then they got Jeremy Grant. I do think he gets moved. I would be really surprised if Dejounte, but not only if he gets traded to Atlanta, I'd be surprised if he gets traded, period, unless the Spurs just want to go full-on tank mode, because they haven't really done that yet. They've really, since they've kind of come down from their prime, they've really been a middle of the pack, upper lottery, 8, 9, 10, pick kind of team. So unless they're just trying to blow it up, maybe. Yeah, I don't know. I definitely think that, Collins, I think, honestly, again, I think it's going to be a little quiet with trades too. The only one that I think makes sense is Collins, and that's really because I thought Kyrie was going to be the signing trade. I thought that was going to be the big one. But other than that, no, I don't see a lot of noise on the trades either.
How about a guy like Colin Sexton? He's restricted free agent. Cavs have some money. They haven't really said too much about what they want to do. They do have some redundancy at positions. between him and Karis LeVert. They're also looking at potentially re-signing Ricky Rubio in the offseason. Do you think there is a market for Colin Sexton, and would it be enough to leave a decent situation in Cleveland to go explore something else? Like, I know the Heat have been high on him, the Mavs have been high on him, but do you think there's a decent enough market for a guy like him to get moved?
I potentially, yeah. The only thing that hurts him, obviously, he's coming off of an injury, and the type of player he is, he's probably going to be prone to injuries. You know, not hopefully not consistently throughout his career, but it just comes with the play style of that smaller, explosive guard. I do think there is a little bit of backlog in that backcourt, especially after they drafted Ochai. So I mean, and also there's not a lot of size in that backcourt if they go with Sexton and Garland. So yeah, I do think moving him would be the right thing to do. Him on the Heat would be really interesting. I'd actually kind of like to see that, but I don't know. Does that mean you move Lowry, move him to the Cavs, give them a veteran presence? But again, you're going to get the size issue, and you're pretty much trading for an older, less athletic, better shooter. Undersized, not undersized, but 6'2", 6'3" point guard. So yeah, I just don't know what the market. I don't know what they can get back from Sexton, because I know he's injury prone, but correct me if I'm wrong, but I know he's made the All-Star team once, I think, unless I'm thinking of Garland.
I don't think Sexton's made the All-Star team.
Never mind.
He may,
I
because
must be thinking of Garland then. Never mind.
I think he didn't come on until the end of the COVID year. Is when he really took off.
Okay. Yeah. So I do think there is value in them, and I could see. I thought I was picking him to go to the Knicks for a long time, because he's the exact kind of player that they want. It reminds me of Dennis Smith Jr. when he got sent to the Knicks, who I thought was going to play great. But yeah, I think it's going to be a fair market. But again, just his play style and injury, I don't know if they're going to get what they want from him. So could try to maybe see how it goes this year. I mean, the Cavs are you could look at it this way. Cavs were a really, really good playoff fringe team, and you're adding a guy that, has been a 20-point scorer. So I don't know, regardless of injury or, position issues, he's still a great player. So maybe just try it out.
Yeah. Another guard that's probably the most likely candidate to be moved, just with the way that the Pacers are transitioning with Tyrese Halliburton. That's Malcolm Brogdon. I'm pretty high on Brogdon. I thought he was a real solid guy with the Bucks. And I think the Pacers got someone that they could really use, and then he got hurt. I'm seeing a lot of talk on he should be at the top of the list for the Wizards to pair with Bradley Beal. Probably would be a much better fit than when they went out and got Dinwiddie. So Brogdon is one that's very likely to get moved. He would also be a good fit with the Knicks if they could figure that out. Honestly, he'd be a good fit most places. Another guy I was looking at, again, there's been talk on it, but we don't know what's going to happen there. But that'd be Rudy Gobert getting moved from the Jazz.
Oh man, that blowout needs to happen.
If they do that, they need to start over. But that's gonna be tough, because you got guys like Mike Conley that have a lot of money tied in to their contracts. Tyler Hero is one that's been mentioned. If the Heat don't want to give him a max contract, which Tyler Hero thinks he deserves, he could be one that gets added in with the package to bring the Heat another star. He's been very adamant that he should start, but he didn't play much down the stretch in the playoffs because he's not a good defensive guy. Any other names, candidates out there that or trades you would like to see, even if they're outlandish?
Going back to the Westbrook trade, I really did think they could make something with the Pistons or the Pacers work with Brogdon, because I think Brogdon with the Lakers works really, really well, and I'd really like to see that happen. But I don't know if the Pacers want to take on his contract. I don't know if they want to deal with the turnovers and the low efficiency. And I don't think he quite fits their system very well. I think if they're going for a star, like you said, they'll probably go after like Miles Bridges or a fringe star like that. But, and again, I would have liked to see LeVert get thrown into that package when he was there, but he's not. So that would be the one that I'd like to see. If Zach Levine goes somewhere, and this is kind of just going back to a free agent outlandish thing, I could really see him on a big market team. Like I could see him signing with, like, I don't know, the Knicks or something. He fits the Knicks to a T. just, one of the big market teams. LA fans would love to see him in LA. I like him in Portland would be kind of interesting too. I don't know if they could make that work with contracts, but I'd love to see him and Dame backcourt. But then again, I also like to see him in Chicago because I want to see Chicago do somewhat well. So I don't know. We're gonna see. I hope I'm not right and that it's gonna be a quiet one, but we'll have to see.
I'm sure we'll be way wrong, and there'll be things. There's always stuff that go on behind the scenes that you're just like, what? That team was in on this guy? I didn't even see that coming.
LeBron will get traded to Cleveland. So,
well, I mean, there are people that think the best interest for the Lakers is to go ahead and move LeBron now while you can, which you're not trading. You never trade LeBron away. You go sign him, but you never trade him away. Right. I don't really have any crazy predictions or expectations for this week now that Kyrie staying. For me, the big one would have been Kevin Durant if he could make his way to the Blazers. Even if Kevin Durant could find a trade to the Wizards to play with Bradley Beal, that'd be cool. I think it's going to be – I think the first piece of news we'll get Thursday is the Knicks have offered $1 bajillion to Jalen Brunson, and the Mavs don't want to match it or something like that. Yeah. I think, again, this is an offseason where not a lot of teams have money. PJ Tucker is going to be a guy that definitely pushes the needle for teams, and I think he ends up with the Sixers because he'd be a perfect fit there. The Sixers could honestly, they could make some weird trades, and maybe they move on from Tobias Harris to clear up space for something. But I don't really have much predictions.
I will say Mavs need to go out and get either John Collins or DeAndre Ayton, and they're crazy if they don't try.
I think DeAndre Ayton would be perfect for them.
Yeah, material.
They pair Luka with DeAndre Ayton and Christian Wood in the paint. I mean, one, they're better defensively already, but those are two solid guys that, I mean, I guess you'd have a little bit of issues with spacing, but I mean, they'd be prime candidates for pick and pop. That'd be an interesting fit. I think DeAndre Ayton's a guy that would make a lot of teams better. I'd love to see him go to the Grizzlies and play with that team, but they'd have to move on from some pieces.
Yeah.
But we'll kind of wrap it up there. There's a lot of stuff coming in the next several days. You're going to see so many rumors coming out, and we'll for sure be doing several episodes here throughout the off season, catching everybody up on what's going on, breaking it down, giving you guys our analysis, and just kind of talking about what we would do if we were in that position. So thanks for joining us today, guys. Off season is really fun. There's a lot more coming down the road. Summer League starts here in about a week, and rosters for that are being finalized. So there's just a lot of stuff coming. So please stay tuned to all of that. And again, follow us on Twitter at The Sports A Gurus and on Facebook at The Sports Authority Gurus. There you will find all the information you need about upcoming episodes and where you can listen to us. So with that, Spencer, thanks for joining me again today. I look forward to seeing what's coming down the rest of this week.
All right.
This was another episode of the Sports Authority Gurus podcast. For future episodes, you can find us on Spotify, Podbean.com, the iHeartRadio app, and on YouTube. Wherever you do listen to us from, please hit the subscribe button, give us a great review, and most importantly, share with your friends.